Member Newsom to lead us in a pledge to the flag. Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And to the republic for which it stands, one nation.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Borbo,
Here.
Councilmember Daris,
Here.
Councilmember Newsom.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Funk. Here. Mayor Moreno.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Well, for those of you attending in person on the Valentine's date night, we welcome you. And if you are in the webinar or if you're watching anywhere online, listening on the radio, we welcome you as well. And if you're not here with us in person, but would like to speak on any item that is on the agenda or at community forum, I'm going to go ahead and give you that phone number. Just know you can also find it on the front of our agenda. So at atascadero.org, you can go to City Council, find the agenda, and right there on the front page will be that phone number and the meeting ID. I'll go ahead and give it to you now. It's 669-900-6833. Once again, 669-900-6833. The meeting ID is 889-2347-9018. And I'll give that one more time. It's 889-2347-9018. And when you call, please let us know which item it is that you'd like to speak on. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
Also move.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a tie. We have a motion by Councilmember Borbo and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Funk. Roll call, please. Oh, and by the way, we will waive the reading in full of all ordinances appearing on this agenda, and the titles of the ordinances will be read aloud by the city clerk at the first reading after the motion and before the city council votes.
Councilmember Borbo,
Yes.
Councilmember Daris,
Yes.
Councilmember Newsom,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Funk. Yes. Mayor Moreno.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We're moving on to consent calendar. The items on our consent calendar are considered to be routine and non-controversial and can be approved in one vote unless there's a member of the council or public wishing to pull an item or have further discussion. So I will look to my colleagues to see if there's anyone wishing to. I'm not seeing anyone. All right. And anyone in the public wishing to pull an item? Not seeing anyone there. Let me go to the Zoom meeting. It's Valentine's Day and we even have people on Zoom. Right. My cursor does not seem to be working. So could somebody else let me know? Is there anyone with their hand raised? No one, nothing. Okay, great. So I'll bring it back and ask for a motion.
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll
second.
Kind of shy there. We have a motion by Councilmember Borbo and a second by Councilmember Daris. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Borbo,
Yes.
Councilmember Daris,
Yes.
Councilmember Newsom,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Funk. Yes. Mayor Moreno.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes.
Great. We will move on to city manager announcements.
Well, first of all, happy Valentine's Day. And I want to assure you, you guys are not too late. Although Valentine's Day is past, you can still get in on the Friends of the Charles Paddock Zoo Adopt a Madagascar Hissing Cockroach for February. So for the month of February, the Charles Paddock Zoo is offering a unique way to show your true affection by adopting a cockroach. And it's not too late. This goes through February 28th. You can give that special someone in your life who is either very hard to shop for or who might just be the perfect person to receive their very own adopted cockroach. They won't actually receive it. They do get the pleasure of sponsoring the Madagascar Hissing Cockroach. The cost is $7 and you can name a cockroach and receive an official certificate of adoption that will include your special Valentine's name as a gift anytime in the month of February. And if that's not exciting enough, you can also upgrade your gift with a special meet and greet with the Madagascar Hissing Cockroach, or get a special t-shirt hoodie for your loved one. It is really a great gift. It's a lot of fun. So adopting a Madagascar Hissing Cockroach from the zoo is a new and fun way to express your love or perhaps lack thereof. So plan a visit to the zoo and you can also experience the special cockroach village For more information, go online to www.charlespaddockzoo.org or click on events. It's always a fun fundraiser. It's very popular. It's good. I also wanted to let you know, obviously the council knows, but I do want to let the public know that we had our strategic planning on Friday and Saturday night. We met with the council staff and members of the public here at City Hall starting on Friday evening. Worked here Friday from 6 to 9 or 6 to about 8:40, and then took it up again on Saturday and to review the direction of the city over the next 2 years. So we did some visioning exercise. We worked on the city's mission statement. We worked on our goals and priorities for the next 2 years. Nothing was decided. Council did not take any action, but we will be bringing back some of those preliminary things, our strategic priorities, those true north statements that we worked on, the city's mission statement, those will all be coming back to you in March at a city council meeting for you guys to consider adoption of. So those will look forward to that. Another thing that we're not too late for is the Downtown Infrastructure Improvement Plan open houses. We've held a number of open houses throughout the month of January and February. This is the last week that we will be holding those open houses. So we're winding down the series of open houses for the Downtown Infrastructure Enhancement Plan project. We have 2 dates left. So if you have not had an opportunity to attend an open house, we will have 2 more events. Thursday, February 16th from 6 to 8 p.m. virtually, and then again in person on Friday, February 17th from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. We really want people's feedback. This is a chance for you to come look at the different concepts, ask a lot of questions. We have people here from fire, from police and public works, engineering. Your chance to ask, hey, we always wanted to know, I don't understand how this will work. You're going to be able to ask a bunch of questions and then give us your feedback one-on-one. This is, you don't have to talk in front of anybody. You don't have to public speak. We just want to sit with you one-on-one and get your input on what types of things you would like to see in this space. Would you like to see more parking, more landscaping, more plazas? What type of lighting, string lighting, our regular downtown street poles? What is it that you want this space to be? Please come give us your input. And last but not least, this is actually very exciting for those of us that have a lot of debris, especially from the storms and stuff. The Atascadero Fire and Emergency Services has launched a new online burn permit system. The new public Fire Safety System, or PFS app, is a user-friendly, free online permitting system, enabling users to obtain important information and services online while allowing staff to track outdoor burns more effectively and disseminate important fire safety information. The PFS app is available for iPhones and Android phones and offers a convenient method for residents to schedule burn days, check condition, and see alerts at any time, including a comprehensive local wind and moisture forecast. The app is free in the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. In your app store, just search on public fire safety, get the app, open it, sign in, and schedule your burn days. Permits can also be obtained online by visiting the city's website, atascadero.org, or by using the PFS app. And to register for a permit, the resident's name, street address, and text messaging phone number are required. Those who do not have internet access can request a permit at 461-5070 extension 8 or visit City Hall at 6500 Palma Avenue. This new online system is very user-friendly. However, new systems can be intimidating. We all understand that. So staff will be there to help residents sign up. Casey, Dave, Matt, Kelly, they're all willing to help people. This is going to be a tremendous help, both for those residents that are wishing to burn and for our public safety. A lot of times we get calls from neighbors and stuff. Hey, there's a fire there. we'll be able to quickly look it up and go, nope, at that residence, they have a burn permit. We can check in with them via the text. This is going to be a tremendous staff saving time. Plus it's going to be good for the residents. So this process is simple and can be summed up in one slogan: check in before you burn. Residents are required to maintain accurate emergency contact information, and you have to schedule each burn. Please, please do not burn anything without getting a burn permit and going through the process to get that permit. So open burning can only be conducted with a permit issued by the fire department. This will get you there. And for more information about burn permits, go to www.atascadero.org, or again, call 461-5070 extension 8. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you, Ms. Rickard. I was so happy to see that new system. I think, as people get used to that, it will be so simple and save everybody time and any confusion. So I like
Absolutely.
saying that. Questions? Yes, Councilmember Daris.
One question, I don't know if I missed it while you were giving us all that great information. Is there a fee associated with the burn permit?
No, I do not believe there is no fee.
No fee. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, my iPad started talking to me and that's never happened before. All right, any other questions? All right, seeing none. We're going to move on to community forum. This is the portion of our meeting that is reserved for persons wishing to speak to the council on something that is within our jurisdiction, but which is not on our agenda this evening. Topics brought forward do not become a subject of conversation this evening, but we will triage and get answers where we can. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes, and we will set aside a total of 30 minutes for public forum. So if you'd like to speak, go ahead and make your way to the microphone. And if you are on Zoom, go ahead and press the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen. So I'm looking at the button. I'm looking, anybody here wishing to? No, just a Valentine's date night. I don't know what to say. No one on Zoom? Going once, going twice. All right. I'll go ahead and close community forum. It will stay open until, hold on, so 6:13. So we will keep community forum open until 6:43. We'll move on to the next item. And so if you decide between now and then that there's something that you did want to say at community forum, go ahead and alert us and we will have you speak at the next available chance. So we're going to move on to our public hearing. We've got one of those tonight, and it's our 2022 California Building and Fire Code updates. So it's Title 4 Public Safety Text Amendments and Title 8 Building Code Text Amendments. And so these will be our Community Development Director, Phil Dunsmore, and Chief Casey Bryson. And we have Battalion Chief Vance on as well. We got the whole crew.
We have
And-
the whole,
and
yeah, we have. the whole-
And
and Dave
I'm
Muehlhausen.
sorry, Dave, you weren't
Yes.
over there with the group. We've also got our building official, Dave Muehlhausen. So we have heaven forbid a bomb drop here because we lose a lot. So, all right.
Yes, we're surrounded by professionals. That's what I try and do because I don't have all the answers, but they do tonight. And we're here once again. It's been a couple of years. Every couple of years, we do this routine of updating the building code, consistent with the state building code. They delivered the draft code to us last year. We've been reviewing that and now ready to locally adopt the state building code along with some amendments that fit Atascadero. Again, it's every 3 years we do this and it's already in effect. It comes into effect January 1st, whether we like it or not. So we're already getting construction permits that are consistent with that 2022 code right now. But this process is what we do to formalize it, put it into our municipal code, make some tweaks as we need to for our local community, and organize the code in a fashion that is at least legible for us. Now, what I like to do really just to give you the effect of what the building code looks like, I always bring it here in person. So the actual building code is in the back of the room behind Chief over there. You can see all those books. Dave Muehlhausen brought those up for me just to give you the visual of what the building code actually looks like. And for those of you that can't see that are at home tonight, it's the equivalent of about 10 phone books. So
Or if
there's a-
AGP could swing a camera over there, I don't know. It
Yeah,
could be.
there's a lot there. So when we go through some of these details, it's a bit confusing. So we're going to try and decipher that. That's why tonight we do have Dave Van Son, our fire marshal. We have Dave Muehlhausen, our building official, and we have Chief Bryson. We're going to give a little bit of a team effort. Chief Bryson and myself are going to give a presentation, but they'll be here to answer your detailed technical questions because there's a lot there. But essentially what we're going to be doing tonight is reviewing proposed amendments to Title IV of the Municipal Code, which contains the fire code. And then it's Title VIII of the Municipal Code, which contains the building code. And each of these, we're going to address what the bigger amendments are, the bigger changes that happened, and also make suggestions for what our local amendments should be that respond to our local conditions. And then there's a few things that are essentially just cleanup because they didn't get carried over properly from the last update and clarification. And I know it gets a bit confusing, but bear with us and we're going to try and lead you through all of that. So I'm going to let Chief Bryson now give you just some of the bigger changes that are happening with the fire code. Following that, I'll talk about some of the bigger changes with the building code, and then we'll sum it up with some local amendments and questions.
And Director, if I could, do you want to do this all at once, or do you want to do fire and then have us ask our questions and then like go Title IV and then do Title VIII and ask questions?
How
What
would you
do
like
think
to do that? I think we're open as to how it,
I
suits
think
you
sometimes
best?
it could be easier to, say, okay, here, let's deal with Title IV, get all the questions answered, do all of that. And then we
Yeah,
can even
let's-
go out to public comment on that piece and then do Title VIII
That
so
works.
that,
just fine. Let's
Okay.
do that.
thanks.
Yeah, so we'll stop after the fire code Title IV, and then we'll pause, question, answer. And even if you want to open up public testimony at that point, and then we'll go on to the building code side, because it really is two separate ordinances. It's two separate things. We're just trying to be efficient by bringing them together in one night.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. This has been a long process for us. We're happy to bring this to you. So I'm going to break this up into a couple sections, the fire code notable changes. Like Phil said, code carryovers and cleanup. And the fire code is basically Title IV. It's made up of the 2022 edition of the California Fire Code, as well as the 2021 International Wildland Urban Interface Code. So we have two books, maybe not quite as many books that are on the card over there, but we still have a couple here. And I have Battalion Chief Dave Van Son here that can get into the code if we need be. So first, for our notable changes, we have a couple up here. The first one is lithium-ion battery storage. And this is in reference to commercial facilities. We don't currently have one or one proposed for the city, but if we were to have proposal of a large commercial battery storage type facility, it would trigger some emergency planning, fire protection plans and that sort of thing. So again, these are large commercial storage facilities that we don't currently have or have plans for. The next is the electrical storage systems, ESS. This could affect a residence. This is more for a backup battery storage, could be in a residence, maybe commercial. But what the new requirement is for a backup battery in a garage, it requires impact protection. So think of a Tesla wall when you're driving your car into the garage. There's some impact protections that are now required. The last one here, the third one at least, is for bounce houses. This brings in some requirements on design, anchoring, which sounds like a good thing that we don't lose any bounce houses. The maintenance, and also requires that they're made to a fire rating similar to a tent. I'm missing one slide here, I think. No? Sorry about this. We do have one more notable changes that's not pulling up on the slide. Fortunately, it's not a large one. It is the wildland urban interface updates. And I mentioned this to you when we brought this a couple months ago. This is landscape and fuels management plans for new construction. And these are not necessarily requirements, but they are for our reference. So if someone were to submit building plans, we're not going to require the landscape plan. If they do submit one, we're happy to review it and provide information on what codes or what plantings can be done in a landscape plan. But again, it's not something that we're requiring, but it is a reference for us. Okay, this first section on local amendments. So these are the changes that we are asking to be made to our local code. So under the WUI code, the Wildland Urban Interface Code, we have four main sections here that basically tie the international WUI code to things we're already doing. So these aren't necessarily changes in how we're doing business right now. We've done this before, but it's changing that WUI code to meet our standards. So this first one for access, it changes the WUI requirement to the California Fire Code access requirements. For addresses, that second one, it changes the international WUI code to our Muni code, where we want addresses put on residences in size and that sort of thing. Road dimensions, it's a local change to align our road widths with our existing public works and fire department standards. And then turnarounds, it changes it to in Atascadero, we need a fire department turnaround at the end of a long driveway. So it gives us that spot for a fire engine to turn around and not have to back down a long driveway. So now to the fire code. So we're skipping from the International Wildland Urban Interface Code to the fire code. We have a couple here. The first is a simple Board of Appeals. It removes the fire marshal from the Board of Appeals. He's already given his interpretation of the code. So if it was appealed, he's not part of that decision. Access to solar facilities. This removes an exception to access for solar facilities. It makes that access road, if we were to have one of those, the same standard the rest of our access roads. So it's just bringing our city standards to that solar facility. The next one is driveway widths. This is a local amendment. We've had driveway standards before, but this is a change where it making it easier for a person to put a long driveway up to a residence on, say, a flag lot. So what it actually does is it, with the addition of a dry pipe, which brings a water supply all the way up to the residence from the roadway, we're allowing that driveway to become slightly narrower. So we can drop a couple feet, makes it easier for the resident to build while still providing access for the fire engine to make it up to the house. And in the event of a fire, have that water supply without a large hose up the driveway. So we don't necessarily need that extra width. The next for fire code local amendments, I'm going to bring up automatic sprinklers. And there's one slight change here, but I just want to state right now, we'll talk about sprinklers here in a moment, but we're making no changes to our sprinkler requirements. So sprinklers are staying exactly how they've always been, but there's one slight exception. In our last update, we did a exception where we missed one actually in our last update. What it is we require a building to be accessed 150 feet from the fire engine all the way around the building on each side. And that's to allow our fire hose to get all the way around. The exception that we missed is that if the building is sprinklered, we can go greater than 150 feet. So think of like a Home Depot. We pull up to the front of the Home Depot. There's no way we can get a fire hose all the way around either side of the building. So the exception in that case is the fire sprinkler. So that's what we're adding back into the code. The next is solar panels. We've been far more restrictive on solar panels than the fire code over the years. And that was really to provide for that firefighter safety, making sure that we have access to the roofway. We've reviewed, we think we can go to the fire code at this point. So we're actually making a local amendment to go back to the fire code and be consistent with basically most of the other building standards. We do have a couple exceptions, however, so these would be a local amendment to the existing 2022 building code. For one, any window opening on the second floor where a window opens up onto the roof, we're not going to allow solar panels right in front of that window to allow the trapped occupant to get out or us to make that rescue. And the other one would be the pathways for firefighters to still make up to the top of the residence, cut a ventilation hole if need be to allow the smoke and fire out, and also access the HVAC systems. So those still have some requirements in the 2022 code, and we're keeping those exceptions, not as strict as we were before, but still enough to allow for firefighter and occupant safety. This next one, fire access road width, this is specifically for roads with hydrants, so roadways. And it's tying the width of the road to our existing city engineering standards. So it's really just tying the fire code when we're in reference to ladder trucks or aerial apparatus. It's not changing the road widths. It's tying this fire code to our existing public works standards, which we've already accounted for the width and the turning radius of our ladder truck. So just a little bit of our cleanup, our carryover. I mentioned, well, before I get into fire sprinklers, let's go with the WUI standards. So WUI standards can be found in several places. We just reorganized and put them all together. So we know that we have a WUI fire area where we build to a certain wildland standard, and those are found in the building code and the California residential code. So we're just trying to make that clear where we pull those standards from. And then the next one's fire sprinklers. So it looks a little bit different in our new update to the Muni code. And basically just want to reiterate again that we're not making any changes to our sprinklers. We're still requiring them the same we always have. What we're doing is we're using the language in the fire code and then only showing our local amendments. So we have local amendments to the sprinklers. In many cases, we require more sprinklers than the fire code does. We're not changing that. We're just only showing those local amendments in our Muni code, which is very consistent with the rest of the code. We don't necessarily show the entire code. We're showing our amendments. So this is really a cleanup process. It makes it easier to update for next year. It makes it easier for us not to miss one of those items because we're just editing those updates instead of the entire section. I think that's about it. Yep, that's the end of the fire code. So we can go with questions.
All right, thank you, Chief. And something I really appreciate that we've seen through this process is that when you see that something isn't required to be as strict as it has been, because obviously safety first, and with our wildland urban interface that we have, and that, okay. My iPad is literally picking up when I say things and strict and etc. So I'm going to just close this up right now. I can't see the agenda, but that's okay. So appreciative that as experience shows that something doesn't need to be as strict, and we're able to make it easier and therefore less expensive on homeowners and property owners. Very appreciative that we are actually taking the steps to do that. Because I don't know that every municipality would. So thank you for being diligent in that way. So I will look to I'll just look to my Hollywood squares here, and I see Councilmember Daris.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for that report. Appreciate that. I do have a couple of technical questions. Hopefully I won't get too technical, but on the electrical storage systems, which I'm assuming that's like the Tesla batteries, I think you said in homes. I didn't review the building code, so I don't know specifically if this is in there, but in light of what was happening I think it was in one of the recent hurricanes, Tesla cars, when they were submerged, it might have been because of salt water, I'm not sure, but that made them prone to fire. So my question is, are these Tesla batteries that's mounted on the wall, is there a minimum height that they need to be mounted on the wall? Not that we're in an area that's necessarily prone to any sort of flooding. We did have an area where houses took on water, but if that should ever happen, naturally, it should be raised up high enough in the wall to hopefully avoid that issue.
That is one of our technical questions that I'm going to have to get help from.
Yeah.
So we might pause for just a sec. I see Dave coming through the book over there. Is that something you can help us out with, Dave?
Yeah, so that right? Okay. So the battery would have to be the minimum 18 inches above the garage floor. Okay, just like any other source of ignition.
I don't, is your microphone on? So I can. Oh, okay.
All right, there we go.
Thank you.
All right, so 18 inches minimum off of the floor would be required for in any garage because it's a source of combustion. It could arc rather. And then what was the second part of that?
No, it was just that. I was just, in
Yeah.
light of what I saw during the hurricane with cars catching on fire because they got wet. I just wanted to make sure that if we had that, but there was a second question is, the code says 18 inches. Is that something that you guys, or we can say, you know, we want it to be higher? Not that I'm suggesting that we do that, but is that within our purview to do something like that?
I'm sure it would be, but we'd have to review the manufacturer's installation instructions
Okay.
to make sure that we weren't overstepping, but I don't see a reason why we'd want to go any higher.
Okay.
There's a code section, R 328, that talks about, protecting from vehicle impact as long as the system of the battery is out of the normal driving path. If it is in the normal driving path, then a bollard would be installed. So.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. Okay, I got a couple more. On the turnaround, Chief, you mentioned that you're adding the requirement for a turnaround at the end of a driveway. I know, I'm certain we had for driveways that were 150 feet or longer, there needed to be a turnout. Is this specific, what you're saying is added at the end of the driveway if it's at a certain distance, or can it be somewhere within the length of that 150 feet?
So we do try to keep it towards the end, nearest the residence as we can. So it's over 300 feet. Then that triggers the requirement. And again, this is nothing new. This has already been our engineering or our public works and fire department standards for driveways. So, but ideally it is as close to the house as feasibly possible.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that because I know that when the driveway, I thought it was 150 feet if it's 300, but I knew that a turnout or turnaround was required already. I knew that. But when you said at the end requirement, then that made it more specific. And I just wanted to clarify if that's what will be required. Okay.
So the turnaround is required if it's over 150 feet. But like the chief was saying, we're trying to get it as close as the house as possible, because that's most likely where the apparatus is going to park if in case of there is a fire. And then we would still get that 150 foot radius with our hose. So kind of two code sections working together. The 300 feet comes when any time a driveway is over 300 feet, they're required to have turnouts. So areas that fire vehicles could pull over and let them pass each other.
Okay, that's what that was. All right, thank you. And then the last one is on the solar panel, the access paths on the roof. What is there a change in the amount of space between panels for the paths as you're walking? What is that width? And then on the edge of the roofs, obviously you've got an eave, you don't want to be standing on that necessarily. It might be rickety. What are I'm just curious of the dimensions of how close to the edge of the roof can the panels be? And then what is the width of the path?
Yeah, great question. So it's different between commercial and residential. So commercial, it's 4-foot pathways. And for residential, it's 36-inch pathways. And that's from, it's not from the actual edge of the eaves, but it's from the edge of the bearing wall to the panel itself. So then that's protecting our firefighters to make sure there's stability on the roof for them to walk.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That's all I have.
Mayor Pro Tem Funk, followed by Councilmember Borbo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one question here with following up on the electrical storage system requirements. Can you just a practical demonstration? If somebody's got a battery for storage for a Tesla or home support that's going to be on the side wall of the garage so that you drive in and out and it's over on the side, what kind of protection are we talking about being required?
So on the side walls of the garage, there's no impact protection required because the garage width, the garage door opening actually provides them, allows them not to drive onto the sidewall. So basically it's for where the vehicle normally would drive if it would be in an impact, in the impact way is where the impact protection would be required. But on the sidewalls of the garage, it wouldn't be required.
Okay, and then on the back wall, so that the section where if you overshoot, you can run into your battery or you're at the wall of your house or whatever's at the back of your garage. What kind of protection are we talking about there?
Yeah, they could be as simple as the parking lots that or parking blocks that we see in parking lots. Something that prevents them from rolling over and getting there. It doesn't have to be as extensive as the poles that you see on roads and stuff as impact protection, but anything that'll allow the vehicle to stop prior to hitting that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Speaking of sprinklers, you have in here an exception regarding, we require sprinklers for new construction or the expansion of a residence that exceeds 3,000 square feet. I read later that doesn't mean a 3,000 square foot expansion. That means like if I expand my 2,000 square foot home to be 3,000 square feet, that would apply. Is that right?
Yeah, so the exception is anything that's either 10% of the current square feet or over 3,000 feet.
Got it. The other question I have regarding sprinklers is a few years ago, the state, when we went through this process, I recall that the state, because they were promoting ADUs, that they exempted ADUs under, I think it was 750 square feet, maybe it was 500, but there was a level below which they said you couldn't require sprinklers.
Right. So
is that still in place?
Yeah, the exception for the ADUs is only sprinklers are not required if the main house currently is not have sprinklers. But if the current resident has sprinklers, then it does trigger that the ADU is required to have sprinklers. It doesn't matter on the square footage.
Okay, so but if you have an existing house, older, doesn't have sprinklers, you can build an ADU and not have sprinklers.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. And then it's under the fire code, but this is really more of a question for Mr. Dunsmore. This is on page 44 of the staff report, because I've been curious about this in the past. I think I've asked when we've had discussions about density and trying to make housing more affordable, how small can a unit be? And this describes that the minimum required floor area of a dwelling unit, known as an efficiency dwelling unit, has been reduced to 190 square feet. Previous minimum was 240. And I guess that's the first time I've ever noticed that in writing. So is that to say that if we were, reviewing a project that was trying to achieve kind of maximum density and lowest cost, you could have mini units that would be as small as, let's say, 200 square feet?
Yes, you're jumping ahead in the presentation. You're
Okay.
spoiling what I'm going to tell you.
Thank you,
next.
Director. I was about to say something.
But it's under the fire code portion of the report.
Oh, is it? Okay, well, it's
Yeah,
really part
That's
of the,
why I'm.
no, it's under draft ordinance B, Title 8. It's not, it's on the
Oh,
same
okay,
page.
I'm
but
sorry, it's on the same page.
It's
You're
okay,
right.
but no,
I
just to answer your
apologize.
question,
I
yes,
am jumping
now the minimum unit size has been reduced to 190.
Right.
When it was actually 220. It says 240, but it was really 220. So a little typo there, but
Okay, so
so
yeah,
now, yeah,
never mind. I'm getting
just
ahead of
teasing.
myself.
I'm just teasing you.
All right, no, I did not catch that right. And then along with, requiring houses or residences to, have the wiring for energy storage systems, the state is requiring that they have wiring for stoves, so you could have electric stoves even if you opted to have a gas stove. So that's just, and I realize there are some cities that are going as far as, banning.
That's probably one of the
stoves,
biggest,
but-
that's probably one of the biggest code updates for 2022 for the
Right.
building code is that electrification ready.
Yeah, because
It doesn't
these are
mean-
added expenses to somebody building a house, so.
Exactly.
Okay, just to make sure I understood that. I think that's all I had relative to the fire code.
Chief, I wanted to ask, you and I talked about this briefly, but just because it's been brought up a little to the north of us in North County, the expansion of what seems to be the high fire severity zones, maybe within California lands, and how that's butting up to, possibly city property. And I think to the north of us, they're a little concerned about that, both from the standpoint of possibly the cost of building homes that could increase, but also the insurance for those homeowners. So the question has been to me is, is this impacting Atascadero? And you gave me a really good answer over the weekend, and I'd appreciate if you'd share that with the public.
Yeah, thank you. So the question pertains to local hazard severity zones, and that is referenced in our fire code. So it does tie directly in. We created our own wildland urban interface fire area map about 2 years ago. And that tied together our building standards to the state high fire severity zones. So what the state does is they produce these maps, one for the state lands, state responsibility areas, and then one for the city, the local responsibility area. And they're in the process of updating those right now. They did public hearings recently for the state lands, and they changed in many areas, our community to the north. They moved some areas that used to be a low or a medium hazard area to high. And some areas changed right around the city, but not drastically. Some were adjusted slightly, but nothing that is really going to trigger a change right on the other side of the border. So what we can assume is that if there's very high right up to your city border, it very well might trigger very high inside the city limits. We've already dealt with that. We've already had very high for years inside of our city. So that's why we created our own map. Based on those changes, sometimes they went away from some of the designations. We wanted to incorporate all of those changes into one building standard. So that's why we created our own map. So to answer your question, they updated the state. They're planning to update the local here. They're saying they're going to release it sometime this summer or maybe just after summer. I don't expect a big change in Atascadero, but if they do, it might be some small change, a few streets over or something like that. We're already building to that standard in a larger map anyways. So I don't expect it to drastically change our area of Atascadero that we're building to the higher wildland standard. I don't see it changing a whole lot for us, where other communities that have never built to that higher wildfire standard in their community, they may have more significant changes.
Thank you very much. And with that, if there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and go out to the public on just for Title IV. And so if there's any member of the public wishing to speak on Title IV, and I will also look to the webinar here. Attendees, go ahead and raise your hand. And Mr. Oslin, I know you did have community forum. Would you be able to wait? And you can speak on this item, of course. Can you wait till the whole thing is done, or
No,
will you
this
be
is
here?
the Title IV is the fire.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask, are you okay with waiting till we're complete with the whole agenda?
I am,
item
but
for
I
the
have
community forum?
comments
Yes,
regarding
I
fire.
understand. I
Okay.
wanted to clarify that part. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have a few questions. A lot of it was clarified, and I appreciate that on the fire. On solar for residential, was that changed to just be bedroom areas for limitations? Or is it the entire house would be the first question? Because I thought living space was different than sleeping space. The next question I have, because we said 18 inches for the power walls, which are the batteries, does that also include outside as well for water or not when you're hooking in solar and or charging stations, because your batteries don't have to be indoors? And then the next thing, when we're talking about height, if somebody was to put their battery storage higher than a vehicle could hit it at the back of the garage, would that be okay as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other wishing to speak on this topic? Right, and I'm not seeing anyone on the webinar, so I'll close public comment in this and bring this back to staff to address the three questions. One had to do with solar, were those changes applying to, over bedrooms only or the entire house? And then the 18 inches, is that just inside or is that outside as well? And then battery storage, if the height was high enough, might that eliminate any other requirement?
Mayor,
Yes.
while they're formulating their response, may I just put a plug in? Please, 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 if you have specific questions or you're thinking about a project, please come into community development. We will have a building official or somebody from our building department or fire department meet with you and look at the specifics, because there's 14 binders there. That doesn't even include the fire code, which is another bunch. So just having that time to look through that is a really good thing. A lot of times we have people moving ahead with projects and then come in to ask. Really, the best time to ask is ahead of a project. I know Mr. Oslin knows that, so I'll go ahead and turn this over to staff to answer those questions.
Thank you. Yeah, you know that the philosophy that some people have of, ask for forgiveness rather than asking for permission. This is actually the exact opposite. You want to come in and find out what are the requirements, how do you meet those? Because if you're trying to deal with them on the back end, it is a headache, it's expensive, it takes so much longer. So definitely thank you for bringing that up.
So the question in regards to solar panels, the requirements are for the pathways to the HVAC system, pathways along the edge. It does not affect the living space, what type of living space underneath, as far as where panels can go, to the best of our knowledge right now. So again, if, like city manager said, if you have questions pertinent to your project, we're happy to look further and go into detail. But right now, what we believe is that it doesn't matter if it's a bedroom or a living room, the panels are affected by those pathways and not by the living space underneath.
Now, on a question about battery storage, and if you had them higher on the garage wall, would you still have to put in barrier protection for those? I'm going to defer that one to Dave Muehlhausen if he knows it, because that may not be that may be something that we have a little discretion on, but then there may be other issues with mounting the batteries that high on the wall, structurally and otherwise. So that might be a complex question. But do you know anything about that, Dave?
Well, my first thought is going with what the code says, a normal driving path, right? So if you're coming in that hot to your garage and you take out a wall that knocks down a battery, then I don't think the code would even cover that, basically, So, and again, we would refer to the manufacturer's installation instructions. Every manufacturer has their own requirements, and we have to review those before we even get into the code. So that's what we would do during that plan check process. And I believe it's the third one now.
Dave, so that would the answer be the same for you were talking about 18 inches for interior, and
exterior,
Mr. Austin was
that's right.
asking exterior, would that be the same?
I don't see any requirement for that unless the manufacturer required it. But, what could damage it at that height on the exterior? There's not much that could, but again, it's just like with the mechanical code. This is something new. So all of these manufacturers have different requirements. So we have to review those first.
And ideally, the manufacturer would know best.
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, any other questions on the Title IV before we move on to Title VIII? All right, I'm not seeing any. Director Dunsmore.
All right, here's where it gets really exciting. So this is the other ordinance, Ordinance B. This is all about Title VIII. This is the building code. Now you'll notice as I go through some of these, there is a little bit of overlap. Fire code and building code tend to talk about the same kinds of things in different ways, but it's similar. But there's some of these items here actually we introduced to you back in November too, as we're giving you an overview of what's coming. We just touched on this one, efficiency dwelling units, now allowed to be as small as 190 square feet. And that doesn't mean they have to be called efficiency units. They're nothing special. This isn't anything like tiny homes. This is just the minimum size of a habitable dwelling unit. So I could go out in the rural zone and I could build a 190 square foot house if I want to. That's now the new small home size. Shipping containers, the use of a shipping container as an actual building is now recognized by the code. It wasn't done that way previously. They're actually called intermodal, what was it, Dave? Intermodal cargo containers or something. They have a strange name for them. Anyway, long story short, they recognize them as a building. And so you can actually build a building with those instead of having them just as fabric to a building or just as building pieces. You can say, all right, that shipping container is now a building as long as you get the energy requirements and the exiting requirements and all those things So that's kind of an interesting new innovative way that code looks at those. Aging and fall protection. Basically, that's a requirement now that new houses are built with those, not built with the actual handles, but built with the ability to install the handles in certain places in certain areas of the building so that one could age in place. It's an aging population. Energy storage systems locations, and that's now been updated to where you can actually have a battery system interior in your house, in a hallway, not in a sleeping room, but in a hallway, which is interesting. And then there's additional electrical details that have been put in for surge protection. And now you've got to upgrade the system in a new home to have surge protection on all of your electrical. There's new changes to electrical boxes for ceiling fans, for outlet boxes on the ceiling so that they're actually attached to structural framing. That's kind of a minor one. And then this one's kind of big. So new commercial and multifamily, not single family, but apartment buildings and commercial buildings that are mandated to have solar now actually also have to do battery storage. So that's a significant additional cost. Battery storage is pretty darn expensive. Long term, it's a good thing because we are trying to get away from, feeding into the grid and having some of these things become self-sustaining. So it's really a good idea, but it's a significant additional cost. Just like we did with the fire code, there are some suggestions for local amendments. The big one we've all been waiting for is off-grid systems. This brings in a supplemental that allows us to approve an off-grid residence. We have one poor family that's been waiting for us to do this particular amendment in Atascadero so we could final out their house. This allows us to utilize that code to be able to do that. So I think it's definitely gives us more local control on that. It's great. And then we are asking to add a list that lists out certain projects that are exempt from a construction permit. That's purely there for clarification to help us out. We just took, what was in the building code. You notice that oil derrick is one of those things on there, which is, the little arm that goes up and down that pumps oil. Not that we're going to condone or suggest that people install oil derricks. I don't know that there's any oil resources in Atascadero, but it was part of the list. So we just carried it over. So it's there. As a list of projects that would be exempt from a construction permit, and it's probably federally regulated anyway, and then there's some carryovers that are from the previous code that continue to get carried over. We talked about this several years ago, flexibility in the code that applies to small homes, tiny homes, they call them, and then standards and guidelines for the establishment of housing during an emergency. Then that would be emergency shelters, which is different than tiny homes. And there's some standards that we did adopt 3 years ago. And that's just being carried forward. So that brings us to questions and also brings us to the recommendation from staff, which is to introduce draft ordinance A to approve the amendments to Title IV, Public Safety. That's the 2022 Fire Code. And introducing draft ordinance B to approve amendments to Title VIII Building Code, the 2022 California Building Code. But we are available to answer your questions still. Thanks.
Thank you, Director. Glad all of you are keeping track of these very important details. I will look to my squares here. Councilmember Darris.
Thank you. Just one quick question on the multifamily, the requirement for battery storage. Is it going to be a battery for each unit, or is it going to be a cluster of batteries that might provide power, emergency power to many units? I mean, how's that going to be distributed?
I don't know. That's a good detailed question. I'm not sure if Dave knows either. We can check to see if we know the extent of that. I don't know that we've experienced that yet. But on that topic, I don't mean to branch off to the side, but I was reading an interesting article yesterday about the fact that if you have an electric vehicle with battery storage, that actually could be used to charge up your home in the incidence of a power outage. And people are selling these inverters to be able to do that. So you wonder if that would qualify for, for battery storage. So I don't know. So anyway, let's see if Dave is ready to answer that kind of a question. If not, we can go on to some other questions while we research that particular item on the size of those batteries and if all the units have to be powered up or if there's a certain capacity or, does it have to have 1 day of storage or 2 days of storage or 3 days? I'm not sure yet.
Well, I mean, the days of storage, that'd be great to know too, but I was just curious, if you build a 25 unit apartment building, does there have to be a battery backup for every single unit? Or can you have a battery system that however many batteries it might take that might provide enough power for the required amount of time, but it's just a cluster that then spreads out to all of them. I mean, because I think that would significantly change the cost. Yes. It's already expensive.
So we're talking about the solar and battery storage systems.
For multifamily buildings.
Yes, so for multifamily, the storage system, all right, so energy storage system, and it's kind of confusing because the energy storage system is the one that talks about single family residence and 1 and 2 dwelling units. And then photovoltaic and battery storage systems is when you get into mixed use occupancies. And so it looks like it's saying for 80% of the floor area. The building shall have newly installed PV systems. So 80% for a multifamily.
I know there's a lot of information here.
There is.
I'm not expecting you to.
There's a whole bunch, but the
Yeah, this is
80%
crazy
is what
stuff.
first jumps out.
But yeah, well, I mean, like I said, when you mentioned multifamily that it's required, the first thing that came to mind is one for each, batteries for each unit or a cluster of batteries. I was just curious if you knew that. If you don't know that answer, that's fine. I just find that because it could be done either way, I would imagine. But I'm sure one is much more expensive than the other. It may be
Absolutely.
even more complicated. But anyhow, anyway, thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Questions? Councilmember Olga?
Yes, thank you. Phil, you mentioned, but I didn't find it in the staff report, probably just missed it. Tiny homes. You mentioned something in reference to tiny homes under 400 square feet. What was that change? You showed it on the slide. But I either didn't properly hear you, or I didn't find in here reference to that. So I'm wondering what that change is. There.
I believe you're talking about the change for efficiency dwelling units. Is that your question?
No, it was
No.
the carryover. We adopted this
tiny
in
homes.
2019 for the 2019 code. And there was some flexibility that we did at that time for tiny homes, the definition of a tiny home that applies to those homes that are less than 400 square foot. And that was one of those carryovers that we did a long time ago. And I think Charles is just asking if you had any details on that. If you
Yeah,
recall.
either what is the local amendment or what is the flexibility that's being referred to here?
That's just been carried over. Tiny homes have always been 400 square feet or less, but there are still minimum room sizes.
Okay, it's just that it says flexibility for code that applies to homes less than 400 square feet. So I'm wondering, what is the flexibility?
Let me look at that. We'll get back to you in a moment on
Yeah,
that.
actually, I mean,
Apologize.
that's not that important for me tonight. It's just
Yeah,
something I'd like to know, so
absolutely.
you can get back to me later on it. Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you. Just a few questions here. Coming back to the efficiency dwelling units for a moment. I see we're taking that down for a complete dwelling down to 190 square feet. What about the kinds of small clusters of like the Grover Beach Cabins for Change project, where those are, I think, probably 103 square feet or something like that, 100 square feet. Little units. There are a variety of little modular units that are predominantly used for transitional homeless housing. And those are units that are not intended to be standalone in the sense that they cluster around bathroom facilities that are not included in the individual units and usually kitchen facilities as well.
So that's different. And that's kind of similar to a shelter or an emergency housing, or they're similar to just a room. So that's not a complete house. So when this definition has been clarified by the state for 190 square foot, that refers to a complete residence at that minimum size. But the shelter definition or for that kind of situation is something else entirely different. So it fits under a different criterion. And that particular 190 does not apply to that. So there's no size limitation to that kind of a definition of a shelter or emergency housing or other facility such as that.
Okay, great. Thank you. And just confirming that, because it wasn't quite clear to me from the text that's on page 46 of the staff report with regard to the standalone off-grid housing, that if a house is small enough or its power needs are small enough that it can be standalone off-grid, that we can allow that in our code and they don't have to hook up to PG&E at all, right? Is that what we're doing?
That is right. And it's not based on size. I mean, somebody could have a power generation system and other systems in their property to completely self-sustaining. Now, there is one caveat to that I'll mention. They do have to have water service to their residents, and that's for fire. That's for fire sprinklers if they're required to have that. That's for fire suppression if they're required to have that, and for firefighting when they get there to the hydrant for that. Even though they don't have to use that city potable water service, they could have their own other rainwater harvesting system or rain storage system or other systems like that for their potable water, but they still have to have that water connection. But yeah, essentially that allows us to say, and not by size limitation, that someone could run entirely off grid. And we're happy to see that we do have one house coming along that's going to fit that definition. It's really interesting.
Very good. And, that's a win-win for both those homeowners and also neighbors and others that are affected by the requirements to get power into some of our more interesting locations. Okay, let's see, I've got another couple of notes here. On page 77 of the staff report in the section 8-2.102 on where things that permits aren't required, permits are required for, are you required to get a permit in order to do your standard sort of maintenance seal coat or slurry coat of a driveway or, that other stuff that you have to do that every few years?
No,
Okay, great. Thank you. Just wanted to confirm that. And then on page 80 in the list of structures, yeah, I noticed the oil derricks too. It's like, we're going to exempt oil derricks from the permits, but presumably they have to have some other kind of permission if you're going to have an oil
One
derrick
would
in your
hope. We're
backyard.
certainly not promoting that land use in Atascadero. There might be a land use implication, but there's not a building code implication. So let me talk about land use. That's a whole different story. That's my specialty.
Okay, very good. And then also there's swings and other playground accessory equipment are exempt from permits. It looks like if they are accessory to detached 1 and 2 family dwellings. So if you got a single family or a duplex, you don't have to get a permit to put your backyard swing. But if you've got a triplex or a fourplex, you do. Is that correct?
That's the way I read that. Is that correct?
yes, that is correct. And if you go past the 2-family, then accessibility codes are required. And then the playground also has to be inspected by a licensed playground specialist.
And what if you do an SB9 lot split? So now you have got 4 dwelling units on your, what used to be, your single family property. You still have to.
Well, assumedly in that scenario, you'd only have 2 units on each property and you'd have either a duplex on each lot or you have 2 single family homes on each lot. So therefore you could still get your swing set.
Okay.
We'd all be happy.
And one more scenario, if you've got, your house and you add a junior ADU, with a garage conversion or an attic conversion, and then you also add an ADU on the property, a standalone. Does that can you still put up your swing set without having to, get a professional playground inspection?
I
all
don't believe
kind
that
of
would
stuff?
fit the definition of a multifamily triplex. That's a different scenario because in that scenario, you have your single family home with an internal JADU, and then you have this detached ADU outside, which is a separate residence. So it's not a multifamily structure. It's not even a duplex or triplex at that point. That would be my determination on that, but I'll look to Dave.
Agreed.
So sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. Sorry.
Okay, and if we wanted in the future to be able to exempt, triplex, triplex or fourplex, from being able to, needing a whole big professional thing to just put up a swing set, do we have that liberty, or do we have to
No.
ask our elected representatives at the state level to change the building code?
That's where the state will draw the line. They don't allow us to make things more lenient typically. So that's where the problem is. They allow us to make things a little different, or they allow us to make things a little stricter. But when we lift regulations on accessibility and all those other things, that's where it's a no-no. That's yeah, I'm not going to belabor that.
Okay, good enough. I'll put that on the lobbying agenda. Thanks.
Councilmember Newsom.
I'm looking at page 29 or 29, 49 that talks about the residential codes and the delete all appendages. I know it lists Charles tiny homes. He was talking about that. I guess some of it is trying to understand what exactly we are deleting. It just says on page 88 that are they being renumbered? Is that why we're deleting them? Because it talks about patio covers, Swimming Pool Safety Act, emergency housing in its entirety. Where did those go?
So the appendices were just relabeled. Basically, I believe that's the question.
When we didn't include any changes to the appendices?
No, we adopted them as written. It's just like appendix Q used to be appendix Q, and now they added an A to it. So
I guess it's harder because we don't see those actual appendages.
But while we're there on page 49, I think we can answer Councilmember Borbo's
Actually-
earlier question, which is right there at the top, number 2 on appendix AQ on page 49. It does mention here about those relaxed provisions. Now we remember what those were, which is taking into account special characteristics used in the construction of small dwellings, such as the ladders and the lofts and the reduced ceiling height, emergency escape and rescue opening requirements. That was the relaxed standards.
Yes, and embarrassingly, I actually highlighted that. Because now that
You were just trying to catch us off guard. I
Councilmember
see.
Newsom
All right.
mentioned the page. I'm like, oh, hell, I highlighted that. There's my answer.
Yeah.
So sorry about that.
You just put delete in front of it. It all seems really confusing because you can't find it anywhere. But I was just trying to make sure that these were the changes that we had put in there and that it was a numerical, I guess, adding of new numbers and letters. Thanks.
And I think those flexibility for tiny homes, we did that in 2021. Was that correct?
We did in 2020 for the 2019 code.
2020, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it had been a while. Okay. I was curious about the EDU, the 190 square feet. Is that typically seen more in a multifamily situation? Like say a hotel conversion, motel conversion, something like that?
Could be, we honestly, we don't see a lot of that, but that would probably be where it would be more common is in a very high density situation. Because that's extremely small. Typically what we're seeing when we see small studio apartments or 1-bedroom units, they're typically over 500 square feet. So 190 would be ultra small. That would be something that would be really an efficiency unit, much smaller than the typical studio apartment.
Well, it seems like the cost to build something like that would be, I would think to add a couple hundred more square feet on wouldn't be that much more. Like you still have so much in terms of, well, and maybe there's more flexibility there too, because it's only 190 square feet. So it's not going to, you maybe require the same types of, foundation or different kind of things that say 600 square feet would. But anyway, I was just curious. I guess when I think of something that small, I think of like those, motel conversions. I know years ago there was talk about one of those in town, which, never
Yeah, they used to
happened,
call
but-
them SROs, single room occupancy. And there were some in San Luis Obispo that were converted that way.
Mhm.
They were old hotels and they were converted to SROs, and they have room sizes and unit sizes that are probably close to that.
Okay. But an SRO and an EDU are two completely different things. Then
Yeah.
there's no crossover.
Exactly.
Okay. And just one last question. I'm curious about the aging in place. Do you have any sense of how much that adds to the cost of building a home?
I don't. What it really refers to is blocking behind drywall so that you could install a handle when, like, for example, where your toilet is or other
Right.
things where you need to install a
Yeah.
grab handle.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be substantial. If you had to convert a house that's already been constructed with drywall, that's different. But
Yeah.
during construction, it's just so much as putting a piece of wood behind the drywall in between two 2x4s. Is that right, Dave? Am I describing that right, or is there more to it?
Right, it has to be a 2 by 8 inch piece of blocking behind where all the grab bars would go. There's also requirements for the electrical outlets, no more than 48, no less than 15.
And why that? Is it just people have a harder time reaching up or down? Is that?
The older you
okay.
get, I guess, the harder it gets.
Yeah,
so,
I'm not familiar with that. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and then they've even included doorbell buttons, 48-inch max height.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. The doorbell one, I just kind of struck me as odd, but okay.
me too.
Because the thing is, you're typically not ringing your own doorbell.
Right.
So
Well, that's for
don't
your
know
old
why.
friends.
Yeah, but, and if you can't reach the doorbell, you knock. I don't know, but
Right.
I mean, it seems like a fairly then low cost way to add that reinforcement so that, if that homeowner or someone in the future needs it, it's there. So nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
and coming up next year, there'll be a requirement for at least one bathroom to have a 32-inch net opening door. So that's coming up the January 1st of 24 as part of the aging in place code.
Get your permits now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the theme anytime we do this. Like, if you're ever thinking about getting a permit, get it now because it only gets more restrictive. All right. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open up to public comment on this item. Any members of the public wishing to speak, go ahead and come forward. If you're on Zoom, raise your hand. I'm not seeing anyone on the phone. All right. Last chance. All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back. I'm not hearing that there are any, not that we have flexibility to make changes. I don't know that I heard, was there a slight like typo change or something that needed to be made, or is the motion ready to go as is, Director?
Thanks for bringing it up, Mayor. There's just a clarification. There isn't actually a correction, but it was the numbering in, it's the old number 4. Where is that? I just wanted to bring that to your attention before we close out. You see some numbering that goes 1, 2, 5, 6 on page 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Thank you.
Page 61.
And that's actually correct. It looks like it's incorrect, but there's a new numbering system that we're trying to introduce.
Is this the new math? Now I know why everyone's so upset about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have Dave Van Son explain that and what's missing there. Why is it that way?
So the number 4 used to be in the California Fire Code, but the ICC International Code Council deleted it, but they kept the numbering system the same way. So in the actual code, it says 1, 2, 3, 5.
And was that a typo in that code and we're just carrying it through to ours to be
No, they just
consistent, or?
removed item number 4 and then they didn't renumber.
Okay,
Should have just put.
It was probably too much to cross-reference everything else, which is what we found. So maybe we just go with that from here on out too. Laura's like, yeah. All right. So there is no change. You just wanted to note that for all of our
Correct. I
edification.
don't believe there's
Okay.
any last minute edits. I'm looking to Dave and Laura. I don't think there was. So
Okay. With that, if there's no further questions, I will look for a motion.
I'll move that we introduce draft ordinance A and B for reading,
I'll
or by
second.
first reading.
We've got a motion by Council Member Borbo and a second by Council Member Newsom, and I will ask our city clerk to read the titles of the ordinances now.
Draft ordinance A, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Atascadero, California, repealing and replacing Title IV, Public Safety, Chapter 7, Fire Code of the Atascadero Municipal Code, and draft ordinance B, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Atascadero, California, repealing and replacing Title 8 Building Code of the Atascadero Municipal Code to adopt and amend the latest editions of the construction codes and accept findings of facts to support the imposition of requirements greater than the requirements established by or pursuant to the California Building Standards Code. Councilmember Borbo,
Yes.
Councilmember Newsom,
Yes.
Councilmember Daris.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Funk,
Yes.
Mayor Moreno.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And with that, I was told that Mr. Oslin had the community forum before we hit our time. So welcome. Public.
Thank you once again, council. Jeff Oslin, resident Atascadero. I have two quick items tonight. One is Barrel Creek. And over a year ago, we requested a larger notification for the planning commission. Didn't happen. I'd like to see what we can do in the future when there is such a large impact of the surrounding neighborhoods. And even though I'm in favor of Barrel Creek, there's some things that I am very concerned about, and it's going to be brought to council, I believe, in a couple of weeks. That's lighting and some noise capability and traffic for the area in which I live, and also fire evacuation. So I'm hoping that one sign that gets wet that's put up on the property in a yellow form that gets kind of torn out or thrown down is not adequate. And when things are continued, we need to do a better job of notifying the public. It's hard to find the continuance, and it's always hard to keep up with everything that's going on in our city, which is a good thing. But it does impact a lot of the people on the west side. So in the future, if we could figure out a better way for expanding certain areas for such large projects. Of course, now with the new fire codes and the new state codes and having to do battery backup and things of that nature, maybe it won't happen, unfortunately, because it's going to add a lot of money to it. Secondly, I want to give positive kudos to our police department. I had an incident at Glenn's Repair, although I can't talk about the entire problem, but with the fast act of the police department, we were able to recover something that has a VIN number and a plate on Saturday evening within a few hours after things got rolling. And I don't know how it exactly works, but I will tell you that Grover Beach found the trailer, which is a $10,000 valued trailer in their city, and notified Atascadero PD shortly after things went out, and we were able to recover it. So thanks to Atascadero PD for their fast acting work, and also Grover Beach. Thank you.
Thank you. And community forum is now closed. And thank you for your input. Thank you also, Mr. Oslin, as well as a few other members of the public who came to our strategic planning over the weekend. It's really important that we get input from the public. And what was really nice is we had a variety. We had someone from the school board here. We had someone who is an advocate and works with early childcare development and preschool, things like that. Mr. Oslin is a business owner. We had someone from the homeless community. So we had a really nice representation of members of the public. And we really appreciate you all committing your time to helping with the vision of Atascadero and making our city even better. With that, we will move on to council announcements and committee reports. And I will just go, I'll start down on my left with Councilmember Daris.
Okay, just this Thursday, Capstone Board will be meeting. in the evening, and I'll report back on that at the next meeting. That's all I have.
I have nothing to report.
The Executive Committee of the Homeless Services Oversight Council will be meeting tomorrow afternoon. And I don't think we have anything scheduled yet on design review for our next. Do we have a next scheduled meeting for design review?
We don't yet.
Okay.
So something coming soon. Promise.
I'm sure there will be. Okay.
We have a city schools committee meeting on Friday at 10 o'clock.
I had a city selection committee meeting at the end of February, and it was to appoint an alternate to LAFCO, which is the Local Area Formation Corporation. And unfortunately, we had no one apply. So we are still looking for an alternate, and it is an elected member position. So I do want to thank Councilmember Borbeau for filling that spot for the last couple of years.
Right. I
Appreciate
did
that.
want to, I can update you on that, and that they sent me an email asking if I would just kind of stay on board until their replacement is located just today. And I responded that, well, yeah, until you find somebody, because I did not express an interest in continuing as the alternate, but I
Right.
will until I find somebody,
Okay,
as
well,
long
thank
as it's
you.
not too long.
I did even try, so, but I'm sure they'll figure, at least it's an alternate position, but you do a lot, and we appreciate all that you do, just the city and countywide. Let's see what else. REACH, the Regional Economic Action Coalition, is been hired by SLOCOG to work on the I forget all these acronyms, housing improvement plan, housing infrastructure plan. We have a steering committee, the HIP steering committee, and they've asked me to be a part of that. So we will be meeting next week, and I will report back to you on that. They anticipate it being a few months, finish up with our recommendations come probably June. SLOCOG, you do know about the urbanized area. We maintain that status, and not only do we maintain that status, but the funding to be received this year is about 50% higher than expected. So that is really good news. We're also doing a reduced fee or fare free for transit. We're doing a study to look into that, because as part of the Pismo congestion, if California is going to put money into widening roads or doing any sort of improvements, they also want to see that you're doing something to take people off of the roadways. And so one of those can be with fare free or reduced fee programs. So we are looking into that, and that would end up being countywide, even though that's Pismo related. You can't just say, oh, free transit for these folks, because then you're potentially excluding other people who are more disadvantaged, and you get into that whole scenario. So this would be countywide. And then let's see. Yep, that was it. And with that, I will move on to individual determinations, and Councilmember Funk. Have one.
Yes, thank you. I want to bring before the council today a request that the council direct staff to draft or draft out and authorize the mayor and city manager to sign a letter of support for ECHO, which is for their application for HHAP program. It's the Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Program. This is the round 2. The state has done a series of programs. The first of those a few years back was the HEAP program. Don't ask me to quote what all the acronyms are, but the HEAP grant's the one that resulted in the end that rolled over into the Project Home Key conversion of Motel 6 in Paso Robles. And then the HHAP are the follow-on grants for additional services. And really what's being allowed now, because we keep asking for this from the state, is to fund operations. ECHO took a big extra load in the expansion that we helped them fund on the capital side to add 10 more beds to their very productive Atascadero shelter. Plus they, added another, 50 beds in Paso Robles that they manage, and their outreach responsibilities are larger. So it's a really big organizational capacity expansion. We want them to continue to expand. you know, and to provide all those
You
services and
had,
more.
yeah, will you sign a letter for Echo?
Okay, good. So anyway, that's the gist of it. We just want to keep
Yeah.
them going. And I'll shut up and answer questions.
No, it's funny, usually you want to mount an argument when you think there might be resistance, but we're all on board with that. And I'm glad with the HEAPs and the HHPs, and I've got the HIP, so, just trying to keep those acronyms straight. But we know like mine's housing, yours is homeless. We'll keep it straight.
Right.
All right, so with that, any other individual determinations? I am seeing none. Meeting adjourned. Happy Valentine's Day all.